Hi, everybody. Welcome to INACOL's Teacher Talk November webinar, A Day in the Life of a Blended Learning Teacher. We've got two experts in that area that are going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. I wanted to let everybody know that the webinar is being recorded and the slides will be available to everybody via email that I will send out tomorrow. You received a recording link in the email that was sent out to you to actually come on here, but if you joined us via a different way, just know that if you don't register, then I have no way of communicating with you following the webinar, so we're glad you're here. As the webinar is going along, if you've got any questions, feel free to type them in the chat room. I'll moderate that and then interrupt our speakers as we're going along if there's any questions about that. So with that, we're going to get moving forward here, just for a little background information. So the blended learning definition that we all use is this one from Horn and Staker from 2013, a formal education program in which a student learns at least in part through online delivery of content and instruction with some element of student control over time, place, path, and or pace, and at least in part at a supervised brick-and-mortar location away from home. And they've added another piece at the end of this in a variety of modalities. So just know that's the overall definition we're working with. Our format for today is you're going to hear an overview, introductions, and presentation from Alex and Haley that I'll introduce you to in just a second. So again, when we talk about blended learning, it does not mean a tech-rich environment. I mean, tech-rich environments are great in a classroom where every student's on a computer, a teacher may be on a whiteboard, but that does not necessarily equal blended learning. It's much more than that, and that's what you're going to hear about today, is what it actually all means. When we talk about blended learning, or any learning for that matter, it has to do with the student, where the student is and what the student is doing, where the teacher is, what the teacher's doing, and then what and where the content is as well. So those are the three main elements of any teaching and learning, which, as we all know who've been in education for a while, can be challenging, and it takes a while to learn that, just as it takes a while to learn how to become an excellent blended learning teacher. I wanted just to generally define a couple terms that we're using throughout the webinar today, where we're talking about traditional teaching and learning, which is my opinion of this, that, you know, it's a teacher lecture, quarterly benchmarks, some limited use of technology is what we're defining as traditional, and then blended is using more of the technology, the course management system, and data to personalize learning for students. So specifically, our webinar focus today and Alex and Haley will share more about that, on how what they do better personalizes teaching for students, how they use data in an ongoing way to personalize that learning, how they use a variety of technologies, and how their interaction with students changes because of that as well to better meet the needs of students. So that's our focus today. Our two presenters today, first is, and I never asked Alex how to pronounce his last name, but I'm going to give it a shot.
It is Paris Kavadas.
Paris Kavadas, that's exactly what I was going to say, but all his kids call him Mr. P. And then Haley from Detroit, Michigan are both here to share with you what's going on in their respective classrooms. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex to get us started.
All right, welcome everybody. I'm glad you're all here. I got to tell you, this is one of the things that really helped me become a better teacher, is this interaction with other teachers, just going to PDs and being involved, and most importantly, thinking about your teaching. So two big quotes that come up a lot in my classroom are, nobody has ever given their best and regretted it. And when kids actually see that, they get a chance to think about it and they become more engaged and more involved. And there's only two options: make progress or make excuses. How many times do you hear kids make excuses why you couldn't do this, why you couldn't do that? But if you're making excuses, you're not making progress. So those are two big things that I go by in my classroom. This is where I teach. It is Mott Hall 5. We are located in the Bronx, in the center of the Bronx. We are and there's a little map for it, in the Soundview area of the Bronx. We are a Title I school. 95% of our students are Hispanic and Black. It is a middle school and high school. This is our first year that we actually have a complete high school, Every year we've been adding on to our schools, starting with the middle school, and finally we have a full 6 through 12. We have about 100 students per grade. 90% of them receive free lunch. And as far as the blended learning, all the students in the middle school science are enrolled in blended learning. They all have accounts, they all have emails, everything is online. Middle school science, the social studies are incorporating aspects of the blended learning into the classroom. All middle school science is doing blended learning. So, what caused me to become a blended learning teacher? Again, part of it is just thinking about what's working and not working. And the biggest thing that came across to me was, I'll give you a second to take a look at this. And I feel that that's what a traditional classroom looks like. Not that the kids are dogs, but that's sort of what we do. We stand up there and we talk, and the kids hear blah, 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 and that's not how students learn. So it made me think, what can I do to change or to help change how students learn? Which brings me here. So for me, the two main goals for using blended learning is, number one, to create an environment that would allow teacher access to what each student is thinking, right? And this can happen with face-to-face and online interactions. I really feel that the elements in a lesson, the activities that the kids are doing, the projects that they're doing, really helps to create this environment. And the only way to really get the information that the students know is through that face-to-face. And then number two, which really applies what they're doing in the classroom to everything else, is to create thinkers. There's too many times where kids are just doing work and they don't know what they're doing. They're just, okay, I got the answer. For me, I don't really care that they have the answer. I want to know why they have the answer or how they got the answer. And again, creating this environment when you provide students with challenging and meaningful activities, okay? So it has to be challenging enough that they need to work at it, but not too hard, because then they're going to give up on it. And they need to explore what their strengths and weaknesses are. And then the last part is working with other students. And in the blended learning environment, kids are able to work with other kids, which normally doesn't happen, or on a big part doesn't happen. So this blended environment, which I'll talk later about, allows this to happen. And now Haley from Detroit.
Thank you so much, Alex. I'm having to remind myself that I'm moderating this because I'm really enjoying just everything that Alex is offering. Unlike Alex, I didn't necessarily decide to become a blended learning teacher. It is just a shift that my district made. And so I went along with it and continue to learn and become better at it. But it's been a journey for the past 2 years or so, and I'm definitely enjoying the sort of turn that my classroom is taking. But just to give you a little sense of where I am coming from, I teach at Southeastern High School. It's located in Detroit, Michigan. I'm going to flip over a little bit. So Southeastern High School is a public high school, grades 9 through 12 in Detroit. It is a traditionally low-performing high school. So we actually, 2 years ago, because we are low-performing, we were absorbed into a state-created school district known as the Education Achievement Authority of Michigan. Again, it was a district that was created by the state government for the 5% of lowest performing schools in Michigan. Interestingly enough, all of the ones that they have so far are in Detroit. So we have 6 elementary middle schools and 6 high schools located in Detroit that the EAA, or the Education Achievement Authority, runs now. And when the EAA came in to Southeastern, I've worked at Southeastern, this is my 4th year, but again, it was 2 years ago in 2012 that the EAA came in, and we felt like the traditional way just wasn't working for our students, either based on their circumstances or based on the different levels with which they were coming into high school, their reading levels and math levels, we found that the traditional classroom just apparently, based on our test scores and all of our data, wasn't working. And so when the Education Achievement Authority came in, they came in with this sort of blended student-centered model that all of our schools have embraced in different ways and sort of made our own. At my school at Southeastern, after 1 year of this student-centered, self-paced, blended learning model, we actually took it a step further and started the Preparatory Academy at Southeastern, which the acronym we use for that is PACE, but it's P-A-S-E instead of P-A-C-E. And we found that after that first year, using the blended learning model, that there were some students who really excelled, who really caught on to the mindsets and the classroom structures and the different systems that we'd put in place, and just really were able to even move more quickly through the material or engage with the material in different ways than we had even expected. And so we actually started PACE as a way to give those students more flexibility. So one of the great things about blended learning is, as Rob kind of mentioned, the flexibility that it can create with pacing. And so we wanted to create an environment where students had even more flexibility, and instead of using a bell schedule where they go to classes every 50 or 55 minutes, within PACE, students actually create their own schedule each day. So a student can decide to spend, an hour a day on math and then 2 hours a day on English. Or a student can actually spend all of Monday on science, all of Tuesday on English, all of Wednesday on math. So it gives them a lot more ownership over the way and the time in which they're interacting with all of their coursework. And it's interesting to see how the students choose to work with their schedules. And we've only been doing this since September, so we're also learning as we go, sort of from our mistakes and from our successes. So that's a bit where I'm coming from. And so moving on from the introductions, I'm just going to speak a bit from my perspective about how teaching in a blended learning environment is different than traditional face-to-face teaching, and show you a little bit of what that looks like in my classroom. So again, it's interesting to even use the term classroom for me because I no longer teach in a classroom. The PACE environment is actually shared amongst 4 different core content teachers. So I share the space with, also I'm the science teacher within PACE. I share the space with a social studies teacher, an English teacher, and a math teacher. So we no longer have classrooms. We have offices that we kind of use as our home base. And then we have set up different learning environments. So we had this very large media center that we turned into basically what we see as a college library. So in the picture on the right, you can see some students working at couches. We have a little cafe there where students can work at cafe tables. They can bring in snacks or even buy snacks at our little cafe that the students run. We have study rooms in the back. We have some large open areas where students can collaborate together. And we have a computer lab, as well as one room that is set up just for direct instruction, or maybe it's set up more traditional teaching with the teacher in front with a PowerPoint, stuff like that. And so again, we no longer have a classroom. We share this space. The students can choose which environment works best for them, so they can choose where they want to work each day. And then over on the left side of the slide, you can see what a weekly schedule would look like that we would give the students. So even though the students they have a lot of choice in their learning, we still provide a lot of direct instruction throughout the week. So on the schedule, you can see sort of different shades of gray and white. Those are the 4 different core subjects that we have. And each day, Monday through Friday, there are different, what we call scheduled learning opportunities that we provide for the students to choose from. Again, a great thing about blended learning is the student choice that's involved. At least, we've, in the EAA and in PACE, we've really embraced the idea of giving students as much choice as possible. So the students, while some of my scheduled learning opportunities might be required. So as a science teacher, I do labs, and there are certain labs every unit that are required for the students. But the majority of the scheduled learning opportunities that we create each week are actually optional, and the students can choose to learn that material through the direct instruction, or they can choose to opt out of it and maybe work in small groups or you know, interact with an option online. So again, we've had to sort of revamp the way that both our classroom looks, our classroom, and I say that kind of with quotes, and the way that we run a schedule. But again, we think that freeing up the bounds or the binds of a traditional classroom really allows for more student choice. So in addition to giving students more choice, it also puts more ownership on the students. So they really have to know themselves as learners, or we as teachers have to work with them to help them know themselves as learners, so that they can make the best choices for their own learning. It also frees up students to choose to either work individually or to collaborate in groups. I actually see a lot more just natural collaboration happening now that I've sort of let go of some of the control and let students just sort of gravitate towards each other whenever they need help. Another thing that I think makes blended learning different is just how it provides students an endless curricular resources to use. So instead of just, you know, I'm going to present the lesson this one way and allow, you know, and hope that this one way that I'm presenting it reaches all the students, now the students have lots of options. So for example, we have it set up so that students can pretty much with any standard or any we call them learning targets that we're teaching, students can choose whether they want to learn that material through readings, through videos, or through direct instruction. So there's lots of resources out there for them, and hopefully we are just providing them pathways to access whatever resource is going to work best for them. Like I said,
this is Rob.
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Couple of quick questions I think that were in the chat room that I think it would be great for you to answer. One, okay. Somebody asked if the schedule, when do the students get their assignments for the week? Does that always, so I'm going to give you 3 questions. First of all, I'm going to assume that all students show up and leave your school at the same time. Another question was, can students participate virtually? And then the third question was, when do students receive those assignments when they can choose to do all English one day or math the next day? How does that work? So those are kind of procedural questions. And then Alex, when we get to you, can answer those questions as well.
Sure. So in PACE, as of right now, students do, you know, hopefully, hypothetically, all show up at school at 7:45, and they're at school until 3:15. And the way the program is set up right now, they actually only take their core content classes in PACE. So they spend 5 hours with us in PACE. They go to lunch, and then they have 2 elective classes in the afternoon after that. And so right now, students are still all coming to the physical building in order to learn, but we have toyed around with the idea, and I think we would potentially in the future like to push it so that there are ways for students to interact virtually, to access the material from their homes if they can't make it in that day. We've also talked about, you know, making the schedule a little bit more flexible. We've toyed with the idea of, you know, you can choose to come in from 10 until 5 if that works better for you. But again, we as PACE, as the small program within a school, are also sort of working within the confines of the way that Southeastern as a school runs and the way that our district runs. So, but especially given some of the socioeconomic circumstances that our students are in, I definitely see a benefit to sort of being a little bit more flexible. We have a lot of, not a lot, but we have a percentage of like, you know, single moms who are having to find some sort of childcare in order to make it to school each day. And so situations like that would be sort of, would be able to be met better perhaps if we were a little bit more flexible with the schedule. And then in terms of the student schedule, and I'm sorry I didn't include a larger schedule, so you'll have to just sort of squint, I guess, to try to see it. But we give that out every Monday. If you can see the white blocks at the beginning of Monday, at the very sort of top left corner of the schedule, that is what we call our Monday morning meeting. So there's 2 times that we actually, as teachers, get the whole group together, and that's every Monday morning and every Friday afternoon. And we use that for culture building time, and then also for group announcements, or we do shout outs on Fridays to help students celebrate one another. But the Monday morning meeting is when they will receive the schedule for the week. And we have worked with them, and I think we're still actually trying to figure out how to best teach students to use a schedule like this, to schedule their own time, and then actually follow a schedule so that they're getting the most out of it. Some students have caught on to it more naturally than others, but once the students get the schedule on Monday, every morning before they get their, at our school, students check out a computer each morning, and so before they can check out their computer, they have to show us that they've made themselves some sort of schedule for the day. Yeah, so hopefully that addresses those 3 questions.
Great, go ahead and keep going.
Sure. So as I said, because the students in PACE have so much choice, they also have a lot of responsibility. So we do a lot to try to keep them organized. And of course, students are moving at their own pace. And so at any given moment, I might have all my students all together might be, well, first of all, I teach 2 different classes within PACE. I teach both physics and chemistry. So, you know, at any given time, a student could be working on any particular, or either of those 2 science classes. One student might be on Unit 1 while another student is on Unit 5. You just never know. And so to help keep the students organized and to hold them accountable to doing all of the, to reaching all of the content that they need to reach, we employ a lot of different organizational tools. You know, just going off of the schedule that you saw on the last slide, on this slide in the bottom right-hand corner, I have a copy of what the student schedule looks like. So it's a blank version of that teacher schedule that we give out. And this is where every morning we make them actually create the schedule that they're going to follow each day. So they have to either say whether they're going to attend one of those scheduled learning opportunities, or they have to indicate what class they're going to spend like their time working on during a specific block of time. Over to the left, you can see the student tracker. So within, and this is part of something that the district told us through the Educational Achievement Authority, as our students from K through 12, as our students are accessing content, they work within this sort of system of learn, practice, apply. So for every learning target or every standard that they're learning, they have to do some sort of learn activity, some sort of practice activity, and then they have to apply that knowledge in some way. And so this tracker here that you can see in the left corner shows you within a particular unit, and this is forces and Newton's laws, it will be broken up into each of the different learning targets, and usually students have anywhere from 5 to 10 learning targets per unit. And they have to choose at least 1 or 2 learns, 1 or 2 practices, and then there's 1 apply activity for each of these different learning targets. So students actually use these trackers and fill them out as they go along, and it helps them see what have they accomplished, what learning targets have they mastered, and what they should be doing next. So this is sort of the way that they work through the course on their own with just, you know, I check in with them and make sure that they know where they are and that they know where they need to go from here. And then we also have so the student keeps that student tracker in the top left corner, but then right below it you can see the PACE Mastery Tracker, and that is a public shared document that we have kind of up on a computer screen in our space, but then any student can access it from their own computer as well. and it shows the student's progress through the course. So out of all of the learning targets that they have to learn to be finished with chemistry, for example, this is where students will actually track their mastery of each of those learning targets. So you can see some green, some yellow, some red. Of course, green means that they've mastered and can move on. Yellow means that they're close, but they actually can't move on yet, and red means that there's some sort of serious misunderstandings that I need to maybe intervene and clear up. And so I use the mastery tracker a lot as the teacher, whereas the student is using that student tracker. As a teacher, I'm more looking at the mastery tracker to see where all of my students are in the course. I can see trends based on, you know, which ones students are mastering and which ones they're not mastering. And then in the middle of the screen, you'll see that, again, we use these scheduled learning opportunities to target either specific groups of students or to target a specific learning target or a specific standard that I want to go back over. And these scheduled learning opportunities can look many different ways. They can be a lecture, they can be a group discussion, they can be group work time, they can be a review activity. There's lots of different sort of shapes and forms that those SLOs can take. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Alex.
All right. Thank you, Haley. So to address a couple of things that Haley brought up, as far as my schedule in the middle school, we do have 50-minute schedules, 50-minute periods, and which makes it a little bit restricting, but there's still a lot that we can do. Haley also talked about choice. One of the important things is the choice and responsibility aspect of this. They do have to be responsible, and they are held accountable along the whole process. The great thing about using blended learning, using different technologies, is that it's really great for special populations. Sometimes kids who don't have great handwriting and can't write an essay, they can type it. Certain kids who maybe have a hard time doing either one of those can actually speak it, and they can make a recording of one of their assignments, and then they could send that to me through one of the platforms, and I could listen to their assignment. So there are many different options. Another option through one of the softwares that I use is it actually translates it. So there's a translator, an English to Spanish translator within the program. So back to my classroom. This is me. This is 3 different situations that can happen. There is a one-to-one, and that can either be on the computer, which is right over here. There are small group instruction times, and there's group projects. The great thing about this is that these groups are constantly changing. There are students here that, especially these 2 students, that rarely work together, but because of this particular assignment, they're there and they're, you know, working together. These boys, you know, they're working on a roller coaster project because we're doing speed and velocity. And while this is going on, and while this is going on, this is going on. So there are many things, and sometimes I do feel like I am in 3 places at once. But it's a great thing. It's, you know, I was talking to Haley before. It's really controlled chaos. If you walk into my classroom, many times people who walk in don't know where I am. There's like, where's Mr. P? And it's because I'm down on the floor, I'm with somebody, I'm at the student's level. So I'm not really up front teaching as far as the traditional teaching goes. There are 1 or 2 days a month maybe where I'll do that, but it's mainly the students doing everything. So let's look at where they get their information and what that looks like. So this is one of the, we're part of this program called iLearn NYC, which is up here, and they actually fund part of our program. And because of that, because we use their platform and we're pushing blended learning, we have received 2 carts of MacBook Pros, which is amazing. And one of them stays in my room. It's my little baby, and the kids get to use that. So what you're seeing here is a news feed. So when the kids log in, this tells them what they're doing. And all of these things here are all the different activities that they're responsible for by, the end of whatever particular time period. So it tells them when things are due, what they have to do, and when they are due. So anything that's green over here is actually a hyperlink. So they can click on this and it'll take them to something that says print out and hand in with the diagram. There's this great thing, hot dots. It's usually for lower level, more of like an elementary level students, but the kids have a great time with this. If you get a chance to look up hot dots, kids have a lot of fun with that. There's worksheets, there's videos, some other online activities. There's a PowerPoint. So instead of me going through a PowerPoint and have the kids, go slide by slide, oh, Mr. P, can you wait? I didn't get that. You don't have to do that. So the students go through it on their own, take their notes, and then if we do have a group discussion or even a class discussion, they've gone through the slides already. Motion scavenger hunt, just connecting things to real world community. And then there's something called the Pearson book, and we have something else that's Pearson Online. That's the other platform. Now, through iLearn NYC, they can submit assignments through here. They can save information on here, so they don't need a flash drive. They don't have to do anything through email. Everything is in one place. I can actually see their progress, similar to what Haley showed before about a tracker. This lets me know how far along they are. I can actually go in and make comments on what they're doing, if they're doing something online. There's something in here called a Dropbox, which is a digital Dropbox. So instead of typing something out and printing it and giving it to me and making another pile on my desk, there's a pile on the internet somewhere, and I can actually go in and read everything and actually score it, and it gets saved in there. The other great thing about the Dropbox is that for research projects or essays, it actually goes through a filter called Turnitin, which runs their assignments through this thing that checks for plagiarism, and it comes back with a percentage of the work that was plagiarized, and it tells you exactly where it was plagiarized from. So it's a good way to catch kids. But once they know that you do that, and I usually tell them up front, they pretty much stay away from that whole plagiarism thing. Folders. Sometimes I do this. There's something about keeping a hard copy that keeps kids connected, because one of the drawbacks that I find with blended learning, if there's too much technology, if there's too much online, it seems like the kids feel like it's not real. They're not as, they don't put in as much effort at certain times, especially at the beginning, until they realize what the consequences are. So when they do take an online test or a quiz, and they get a 40 or a 50 on it, until they actually see the number and I meet with them, they don't think it's real. So what this folder does is it helps them stay organized. This is an example of what it can look like. It lists the assignments over here, the date that they completed it, they have to sign it, and the biggest part right here is they don't get credit for it until I sign it. So if they're making flashcards, for example, and here it says they had to make, this person made 10 of them, they might do it, but they're not going to get my signature until they come over to me and say, Mr. P, I did my flashcards. And I'll say, okay, so I take out a couple of flashcards and I test them on it. If they pass the test with me really quick, I'll give them a signature. And the same thing with all of these other things. They need to get my signature. And again, this adds a bit of accountability, that they know that they can't get my signature if they just do something. They have to know what they did. All right? This here on the left is the next step up from this, which the student actually creates. And they're creating this list from the list over here. So there's a transfer of information, again, that responsibility of making it real, where the student has to write down what they did and when they did it. This is an example of what else goes in the folder. This is one of the worksheets that they had to download from there. This is one of their diagrams that they did before they actually built their roller coasters, which is really cool. And again, everything is in one place. There's a book that we use that's called Interactive Science. This works together with an online version of this called Pearson SuccessNet. I'll put that up at the end, where students use this book and the internet to work together, because what they don't have in the book they can get on the internet as far as animations, interactives, virtual labs. So there's a great back and forth, and certain kids don't have access to computers at home, but they do have access to computers in the classroom during the day. So what it looks like is, once they have their list, again going back to here, once they have their list of what they're doing or what they have a choice of doing, it's up to them to decide what they're going to do. Some of them might want to work on the computers. Some of them might want to work on their roller coaster project. Some of them might want to work with somebody else. And what my responsibility, and this is really where I think it's the effectiveness of blended learning comes in, is I get a chance during this time to conference with several students every day. So if my goal is to meet with 5 to 7 kids a day, by the end of the week I can get to all the kids. And it's in those little moments where I get to know specifically what the student knows. And there's really no hiding. You know, a kid can hide, they can, you know, hand in a homework assignment and sort of fake what they really know. But if they know that I'm going to come around and sit with them and talk to them and say, okay, how did you actually get this? Where did you find this information? It's in those moments where I know and they know what's going on. And if at that point they don't know what's going on, I'll make a note, whether it's in one of the apps that I have on my iPad or in a notebook, and says, okay, you know, I need to move Timmy with Maria, and we're going to do a little group session and go over the things that they're having difficulties with. Or what can happen from that point, if I see that a student is exceeding where they're supposed to be, they can be a student teacher. They take over and they say, okay, listen, Tom, you know, you know this material really well. Why don't you go and teach this to somebody else? And they love that. And I'm going to show you something else later on in the presentation where the effect of this was fantastic. All right. Okay. Planning lessons. All right, how is this different? And personalized learning for students. When I plan, it's happening all the time. So for my next unit, I'm already thinking about, what am I going to do? What activities are the students going to be doing? What are the different entry points? How are they going to access this information? Do they need to meet with me? Are they going to get the information from a book? Are they going to get the information from a video? All of these different things. And when I have an idea, I say, okay, this is a great website. This is a great worksheet. This is a conversation that I have to have. And it's all of these things that get compiled into this sort of unit plan. And then it's a matter of sort of just putting it out there for the students. So there's a lot of work up front before the unit actually starts. But once the unit gets started, you don't really have to worry about the lesson planning, because it's all done. Then you're free to do the one-on-one conferences with the students. And as far as personalizing, again, that's really in the one-on-one conversations. The kids actually love it. I mean, they're scared, but initially. But then when they realize that, all right, I got this. When is Mr. P coming around? I want to show him what I know. There's a great pride in what they do, which really goes a long way in learning. So data. Oh my God, we hear data. What do we do? How do we use it? So this is the Pearson Online that I was telling you about, and this is just an example of a test report that I ran. I don't personally like doing a pre and a post. I do more of a mid and a post, because as we all know, when somebody does a pre-test, they're pretty useless because everybody does really bad on it. So what are you really learning by doing a pre-test? Not that much. So what I did here is I have one that was done on the 1st and then one that was done on the 18th. And it's the same test, and I don't know if you could see the numbers. It looks pretty clear, but students from a 58 to a 74, 84 to 89, 95s. This one student went down, this one went up by 10. So there really is growth. And this particular student, he is a suspension kid. He's not in school a lot, and he really doesn't do his work. This student happens to be an L, so even though the progress is not great, it's still making progress. And this is the numbers that the students got during this test. Now, the other thing, item analysis. So based on that, I get to look at the questions. I get to see which questions students were struggling with as a whole, and down at the bottom it says % correct. 96, 65, all of these numbers. So just by looking at this really quick, I can definitely pull these students, and there's a bunch more because there's only 13% correct in the whole class, and maybe this is a topic that I have to go over as a group, as a whole class. Anything over 70%, I really don't have to do as a whole group. I can actually pull individual students to do that. Now, looking at individual test assessments. This is one student who got a 79 the first time and 89 the second time, and it shows the places where they mastered or didn't master. So this student actually grew in graphing acceleration, so I was able to see that. And then I can look at an individual question. This is that question 6 that most students had a problem with. This is the wrong answer, and then we can actually, looking at this together, I can say, okay, so this is the wrong answer. What's the next possible answer that makes sense? And again, they can't hide with this. They have to come up with something, or I'll sit down with them and we'll come up with a way to figure this out. Keeping track of data. This app is actually fantastic. It's called Teacher's Assistant Pro. I think it's a couple of dollars. There is a free version, but it doesn't do as much. So when I'm walking around, I'll either have a notebook, I'll use Teacher Assistant Pro, which is on my iPad. There's information on iLearn, and there's a Pearson online like I just showed you. And this is what Teacher Assistant looks like. So there's this one girl, and I could actually log different things that they're doing. And picking one, this one happens to be a leaf inquiry. You can, code it by color, give it a score, and then give a little description. Also down here, you can actually take a picture of it, and it stores it in here. This is a picture of what the student was working on. Here's something else. The student didn't do so great, not making good connection between independent variable and dependent variable. So this is something that I can have a discussion with the student later on. Now, this activity I just tried for the first time on Thursday, and it was amazing. I was literally in tears because I was so happy that the kids were actually able to do this. So here's how this works. I set up 3 little poster board things. One says I need support with. The next one says I can help with. And then the final one says we got it. Now what the students do, and this was done at the end right before our test, and a lot goes into the explanation of how to do this particular activity. So the kid would write their name, and they would write the topic that they needed support with on the little poster, and they would go and they would put it up and post it on that little poster board. Now, other students who were solid or who had mastered a particular topic would put their name, and they would put the topic that they were good at. And what would happen is the students would either go to this particular poster and say, okay, so I see that Randy knows about motion. So I would go over to Randy, the student would go over to Randy and say, Randy, can you please help me with motion? And they would sit down together, and then after they exchanged their information, they would put it over here. Now, sometimes somebody who had mastered a particular topic would go over to this board and maybe pull one of the Post-its from there and say, okay, Frank, I see that you need support with this. I can help you. And what was amazing was that all of these students, again, what happened was students who never worked together were working together. this student back here is checking the board because he wants to go help somebody. I've never seen these two kids work together ever, and he's actually looking, she's pointing, great interaction. I have a co-teacher for one of our sections, again, working over here, students working back here. Then you always got one little banana in the background doing something else. And this girl was so excited that I just barely caught a picture. She said, you know, she started clapping and she's like, oh my God, I can't believe we just did this. I just taught somebody something. And seeing the student be so happy about teaching somebody else was the most amazing thing ever. And the kids just saw it in my face. Mr. P's happy we were able to do this. And it was something so much more than I expected. It was wild. And, you know, kids are like, we should do this again. And this is really something even more than blended learning. The kids took responsibility for their learning. They saw somebody struggling and said, I can help you with this. And the transfer of knowledge that occurred was amazing. So it's something that's doable. Again, I think a lot of it goes into the explanation of it, but it was something that I suggest that you also do. All right, Haley.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Alex. So stepping back to the question of planning a little bit, I want to show you what my planning looks like. And echoing something that Alex said, when you're working with blended learning, the lesson planning sort of moves from, you're no longer planning daily lessons, you're planning more from the unit level. And so I work with other science teachers in my building. There are other, I'm lucky enough to have other chemistry and other physics teachers in my building. And so we collaborate together to create our units. And basically for me, in order to streamline it and make it as quick as possible, for each learning target, and this is sort of down in the right-hand corner of the screen, for each different learning target in a unit that a student has to learn, we'll develop key points that we expect the student to know and understand and be able to articulate. And then, like I said, in the EAA, we have this learn, practice, and apply model. So there's always going to be 3 different learn options for my students, some sort of teacher-led direct instruction, a reading option, and a video option in order to reach different learning modalities. There's going to be at least 4 different practices that they can choose from, and then some sort of lab or project, some sort of application. So trying to reach more the higher levels of Bloom's, trying to get students to interact with the material a little bit more rigorously. And so this is what the unit plan would look like. And then on a daily basis, I'm basically just taking that plan and building it into an active curriculum. So on the left hand of this slide, you'll see what the teacher platform, so all of our students access their work through a digital platform called Buzz, and it's something that the district has provided us. From the teacher's side, this is what the class syllabus looks like, and it's just where I load up all of the different options that I want my students to have access to. So on the daily basis, I'm just constantly building that curriculum using stuff that the district has provided, using stuff that I'm creating myself, using stuff that I'm finding in books and online, and just really pulling together anything that I think might be beneficial and organizing it in a way for the students to access it. Then, again, we have that weekly schedule that I showed you. So at the top of this slide, you can see when I'm planning out my week, I'm thinking about what scheduled learning opportunities am I going to provide. And so for this particular week, on Monday, there was an optional lab analysis that students could attend with me. You know, Tuesday we had a note session, like a working group for students who needed to wrap up Unit 2. And so I have, again, my students can choose the pace at which they work, but I have a standard pace at which I offer material, that in which I deliver lectures, stuff like that. And it's based on, you know, if you want to finish the course in the standard school year, you need to be able to keep up with my pace. If you want to work faster, that's great. If you need to work a little bit slower through a particular unit, that's perfectly fine. But if you plan on completing this course by the end of the school year, these are sort of benchmarks, or this is the pace with which you should be working through your material. Sometimes I'll then go back and re-offer particular learning opportunities, like offer labs a second time for students who weren't there, or do a lecture again for students who are maybe working a little bit slower, try to catch them up. But over the weekend, I'm sort of thinking about what's this week going to look like for me and what scheduled learning opportunities am I going to provide. And then, you know, on Friday, I don't have anything scheduled, so that means that I'm going to spend a lot of my time on Friday in those really important one-on-one conversations that Alex talked about. And it's an interesting thing about our particular program is that, you know, we have a pretty large space. We have different environments that students can work in, and I'm constantly moving around that environment trying to check in with students. But it's possible if a student chooses not to work on chemistry, for example, since they're making their own schedule, they might choose not to work on chemistry on a particular day. So it's possible that I might go a whole 24 or 48 hours without talking to one of my students. But when I am meeting in those one-on-one conversations, that interaction is so much more meaningful than when I just stood in front of the class before. So the time that I spend maybe interacting with students is a little bit less, but when I have those interactions, they're so much more targeted and so much more personalized to that student's learning. And then in all that other time when students are not interacting with me, they are doing a lot of collaborative teaching, like Alex showed in his excellent example, pairing students up to teach other students. And they're learning how to access resources either in books or online in order to teach themselves. So I think it really helps to there's a learning curve involved, you know, so making it so that students are able to access materials and teach themselves or teach one another. But when they're able to do that, I think we're giving them skills that are going to be great for them to have in college or in their careers and stuff like that. So then I'm again using data on a daily basis in order to create my scheduled learning opportunities for the week, in order to see which students I need to prioritize checking in with, in order to create groupings of students that need to work together. So the data is pulled up pretty much in front of my face even throughout the day I'm looking at it. And so through Buzz, this is the data that I'm seeing from my side of Buzz as the teacher. So you can see the difference. My students at the end of each learning target have to take an exit ticket, and then they have to get a 75% or above on that exit ticket in order to move on to the next learning target. So they can't move on until well, hypothetically, they can't move on until they've mastered one, until they've mastered the previous ones. And so you're seeing a lot of 75s and 100s because if the student did not master it on that first try, then there's different intervention steps that I take. So in order to have a quiz or an exit ticket reset, you have to meet with me one-on-one. So again, it's making sure that those students who need a little bit more intervention or need a little bit more support from the teacher are being forced to check in with me before they just keep taking it. And then I will have specific learning opportunities that I plan for maybe a specific learning target or for a specific group of students. So I'll look at this data and see that a particular student is just struggling through this unit, and maybe pull all of those kids together to do a little bit more direct instruction with them. Or I might see that a particular learning target is, if a lot of students are struggling with it, if mastery is low for that particular learning target, I might offer another scheduled learning opportunity to maybe approach it from a different way or to help kids support one another. But the data is just so important, I think. And if you're using the data effectively, you're going to be just so much, you're not going to waste as much time. You're really going to be able to target the time that you have with students to make sure that it's effective. So talking about how the learning is personalized for students, here's another, this is what Buzz looks like. On the right side of the screen, you can see what Buzz looks like from the student perspective. So they have a menu of options when it comes to each of their learn, practice, and apply activities. So they're able to choose what type of learning they want to do. And then as they work through it, this is another way that helps them monitor where they are in the unit. So once they've done an activity, it sort of checks it off for them and they know they can move on to the next activity. But as a teacher, I'm just always trying to make sure that those options that they have to choose from are differentiated both for different learning styles as well, you know, to make sure that there are different differentiation for our special ed students. So what I can make groups in Buzz and offer, either I can put all of that material, kind of push it forth to all the students so that they can choose, or I can be a little bit more specific with modifications, and to certain groups of students in Buzz, they might only see 2 of the 4 options if I think that that's the ones that they need to do. But I try as much as possible to leave it open to their choice. Down in the bottom left, you see me checking in with one of my students in one of those one-on-one interactions. And I mean, I'm doing that constantly. And like Alex said, it feels like you're in 3 places at once. I rarely sit down during the day, and when it is, it's just to speak with a student. But there really is no better way to personalize learning than in those one-on-one interactions with students. So I can't speak enough about how important those moments are, and I think Alex also kind of nailed that point home. So obviously we rely a lot on various technologies. Sorry, I'm hearing a lot of feedback.
So I think let me just stop you for a second. And okay. Somebody's on the phone. If you could mute your phone, that would help the rest of us to hear okay. Or turn off the talk button. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, so we rely on technologies a lot, and there are some that are sort of go-to for me, just so that I could spend all day, every day looking through the internet and looking for specific technologies that are going to be beneficial for my students. But there are certain go-to technologies that I find most beneficial. For me, again, the Buzz platform, that digital platform where we, as a district, organize all of our resources, all of our curriculum, is just priceless. I don't love everything about it. I definitely am always giving the district feedback on ways that it's not working for me. But just having a central place where students can access everything, a central place where they can go each day, and it's helping them track where they are in the unit and helping them communicate with me about what they need more help on or what they have mastered. Just to have that all in one place is pretty amazing. Aside from that, there's a lot of online places that I'm turning. Again, we like to always offer videos for our visual learners, and so I use YouTube a lot. That, of course, takes some teaching in order to teach students how to use YouTube responsibly. But once they learn to use it for the learning, it just opens up a world of resources. And then I also, from time to time, will make a video or record a lecture and upload it to YouTube so that students can access it later. So in addition to YouTube, I use a lot of websites that are specific to science curriculum, like SET Interactives, that allow students to do an online lab or an online interactive. I use BrainPop. I use down at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a site called Neo K-12 that allows me to make these kind of just short matching quizzes. I do a lot of vocabulary that way, just to offer students many different ways to interact with the material.
So Haley, I'm going to interrupt here and ask
Sure.
Alex to kind of do his technology quickly and then jump into your kind of final thoughts so we can respect people's time. And then if people want to stick around after the top of the hour and ask further questions, we'll answer those that way. Thanks, Alex.
All right. Thank you. Diane, I do see your question there, so if you do want to hang out later, I can give you some details about that. I do realize that a lot of what we're saying seems like it's just out there, but what you have to do is actually plan out how long something takes. So, if you're going to, I would suggest starting with one unit, and literally if you're going to show a brain pop, sit down and do it, and see how long it actually takes you to look through it, to take notes, to go back, to look at it again. Think about how long that would take a student. So if it takes you 5 minutes, multiply it by 8,000, and that's how long it would take a student to do it. But, joking, but that's really what you have to do. And then you get a sense of how long different things take, how many different learning activities you need. I like that word, Haley. And putting that all together. And how many days is that going to take for the kids to do things at home or in school? And then, go from there. Now, as far as online resources, this top one, again, I just found out about it. You need to be current on new things. Britannica Pathways, it really encompasses everything that we're doing, especially with this whole Common Core thing. And it's really cheap. It only comes out to $3 a student for the whole year. Really go check that out. It's amazing. I'm in the process of begging my principal to get that money. I might even pay for it for myself if I can. Pearson Interactive, which is what I'm using now. PBS Learning, there's great videos there. There's actually lesson plans that you can do, worksheets, a whole bunch of things. Brain Pop, NBC Discovery. We get that free through iLearn, but you can access that. You would have to pay for that otherwise. Teacher Assistant Pro, which is an app. Class Dojo is a really good way to visually track students while they're working. So you can put it up on the smart board, and if the kid's on task, you can click a button and they'll get a point for being on task. If they're not, you could subtract it. They get to create their own avatars. It's actually pretty cool. Khan Academy, I don't know if you're familiar with, but there's some great videos. It's more of a high school level, but you can definitely extend learning to the higher level kids with that. And Nomia is another website, app that you can use. And I think, final thoughts. You have to, like I said, sit down, try it out, plan everything out. Do one unit. Don't expect to do everything all at once. You really have to, sit down with different people, visit different classrooms. Actually, I think here it is. You have to network, go to conferences. What I did and how I put all these things together is really picking and choosing different things that I've learned along the way and putting it all together. The whole thing about student choice, which Haley mentioned, is huge. Letting the kids think that they have a choice. I mean, do they really have a choice? Yes, with certain things. But you're giving them options to choose from. And they just, love that. So get out there, see what other people are doing. So when you're thinking about this, and this goes along with Diane's sort of question, these are things that students should be able to do. If you have a problem to solve, and that you can transfer that information, they should be given something that is solvable. So they do have to experience success. Background knowledge is very important. They should know what it feels like to fail. One of the acronyms that I've seen somewhere for FAIL is the first attempt in learning. And when kids actually see it that way, it's like, wow. And I said, you should be failing. Most people are failing most of the time, and you're learning from those experiences. And then, coming up with different approaches to solve a problem. Discrepancies and misconceptions are huge. So when they see that and, they try to explain something and they end up seeing the real reason why something is happening, is, it's amazing when they actually get to see that firsthand. And Haley, you going to wrap up?
Yes, just a couple of my final thoughts or recommendations. Something that we in PACE really, I think we do well, but I wish we even, I think we could do even better, but I think it is so integral to effectively using a blended learning environment, is to teach students to really understand and become agents in their own learning. So I think it's easy to just put all of the resources out there, or to maybe put that choice in front of the students, but you have to teach them the responsibility that goes along with that, and you have to teach them to know themselves as learners and be able to make the right choices for them. So as I said, in PACE, we spend time at the beginning, at the end of each week in order to make those choices and then reflect back on them at the end of the week. So that culture piece and that reflection piece, I think, it's easy to overlook, but is just so important to effectively using blended learning. And then again, data is just so important, I think, from the teacher standpoint. You have to be looking at the data. You have to be targeting either small groups of students or individual students in order to have those one-on-one meetings, those one-on-one interactions to basically support them in whatever way that they need. And then for me as well, collaboration has just been so key, either with other teachers who teach my content or with the other teachers who work within my that collaborative environment of PACE. You really, with all the resources that are out there, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to find someone who can help steer you in the right direction. I'll sort of end it there, in case, or unless Alex or Rob want to come in and say a final word.
There was one little quick thing. Yeah, Rob?
Go ahead, Alex. Go ahead.
Okay, one little quick thing. So last year, our social studies teacher, one of the social studies teachers, was trying to do this blended learning. So she had a couple of online things that she did, and she gave a test after the kids did the online part. And she came back to me and said, the kids did really, really bad. I said, okay, and then what did you do? And she said, well, then I did what I usually do. And then I said, well, okay, then how did the kids do? Then they did really well. I said, what you did separately, if you combined, that's what blended learning is. And she said, oh my God. She goes, you're right. And that's really what it is. It's taking what we normally do with the technology part and the one-on-one interactions, putting it all together. That the way that it's put together is going to change day to day, week to week, year to year, because you're constantly modifying what you're doing, and you're constantly making it better. And it's going to change depending on the group of students that you have. But it really is an amazing thing. And after that, she really put it together, and she's using this all the time in social studies. So that's my little story.
Great. Please join me in a round of applause or happy faces for Alex and Haley, and thanking them for all the time they took to put all this together. Thank you all for being here. As I mentioned at the beginning, the link to the recording and to the slides will be sent out to you. And then, of course, there's Alex and Haley's email if you want to follow up with things there.